Hello and welcome to Lens Life. My name is Phil Johnson, and we are here to discuss the impact of glass, as well as motivate, inspire, and educate. So today I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Tim Johnson. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
And this one's kind of a stretch, but to talk about the impact of glass, here is my reasoning. So when you take photos or take video, you end up editing, and you also end up maybe doing jobs that aren't in the normal realm. So Tim actually gave a speech and asked me to edit it. So in editing that talk, I was exposed to these really incredible concepts that I wanted to share with everyone. And part two of the impact of glass is that my hope is that someone sees this video and that it has giant impact in their life, because I really do believe that what we're going to discuss today has the potential to change people's lives, whether they're going through what he's talking about or other things. I think there are a lot of takeaways. So, Dr. Tim, what was the name of that talk that I edited? Because I actually forget. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the original name was called Stayin Alive. It was inspired by the Bee Gees song from 1978. And I gave the talk with another physician who wrote a book in 1978 about physician wellness. And so it also has a third meaning, because Stayin Alive is the tempo that we would use doing CPR on an unconscious patient. You give 100 beats per minute, and that's roughly the cadence of staying alive. So yeah.
Quick reference to The Office. Have you seen that scene?
No.
Oh my gosh. All right. So in the Office, Michael hires a resuscitation Annie to show all the employees how to do CPR, and the host says you got to do it to the beat of Staying Alive. And Michael gets on top of the dummy and says, "At first I was afraid, I was not sure." She's like, "No, All right, so
nice.
So, all right, what is the talk like? Who's it intended for? Like, what's the purpose and all of that?
So the talk was delivered at a humanities symposium for physicians and healthcare providers, and it was about burnout, and specifically in medicine we call it moral injury, which we can talk a little bit more about. And ultimately, it was centered around physician suicide, because in 2018, there was over 800 doctors that committed suicide in the US alone, which breaks down to 2.375 per day. And that is 6 times what is happening globally. In the rest of the world, it's just 0.4 physicians per day committing suicide. So it was just, it was a shocking number. And so we had a really good discussion that day.
Wow, that's crazy. So, I originally thought burnout was just like a term, like, oh, I'm so burned out. So it is it like a, I don't know, medical term? And, what exactly does that look like and cause that, I guess?
Well, they first looked at it in 1974, at which point they defined it as loss of energy, power, unfulfilled wishes or goals, exhaustion from failure, and attrition. So attrition is like being worn down by wind if you're a big rock. So all those statements combined, they defined as burnout. And then the definition evolved. So about 15 years later, they included becoming emotionally exhausted, depersonalized, so completely removed from your experience at work, and a lack of personal accomplishment.
Mm.
And you know, a lot of these are very specific to medicine. But in 2002, they advanced it further to say that it's a complex interaction between the physician, environmental stressors, genetic vulnerabilities, and coping styles. And then just a few years ago, Simon Talbot and Wendy Dean in 2018, they likened it to what happened to soldiers in the Vietnam War,
Mm.
who joined the army for ideals of freedom and liberty, and then were confronted with gruesome realities on the front line. And so that's how they described healthcare workers' experience joining medicine because they want to help people and they're passionate, and then finding out that it's almost impossible to deliver that care in our current broken healthcare system.
Nice, although not nice. So then, I mean, basically, then you define this thing and how it happens, and then you go into, you know, ways to combat it, basically, and that's basically the meat of what I want to get to is, what are some of those things? Because you know, even though what you were talking about is very specific to physicians, it's certainly applied to me, and I'm sure it can apply to a lot of other people, especially during the pandemic, and you know, just anything, people dealing with anxiety or depression or anything like that. I feel like a lot of the concepts you talk about can help a broad number of people.
Right. Well, the first step is individual resilience. And I talk about how, as I was growing up, I was in this spiritual group for a couple of years where every day we did 100 push-ups. We ran a mile a day. We meditated every day for about 30 minutes. We did an act of kindness every day. And those 4 or 5 things were intent on developing yourself mentally, physically, spiritually, and then putting the focus on others. So it's just so important to say that the first step in resilience is doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy to be happy. You know,
Yeah.
it's it takes a so that's, I mean, individual resilience is that's a challenge, you know, because finding the work-life balance, finding time to do exercise is almost impossible. You know, now I have 2 kids, and today I was woken up by a Rudolph doll being, you know, smashed in my face. So instead of going to do 100 push-ups, you know, I just started changing diapers, you know. And I know a lot of people have the same situation where it's so hard to exercise, but whatever you can do for balance, that's going to just help you out. But then in terms of specific tricks, the first one we talked about was power posing.
Wait, so before we go there, a really cool quote that I heard is, you know, in Back to the Future and movies like that where you're placed into the past, they're so intent on you not disrupting anything, right? Because if you change one little thing, it's going to drastically impact the future, right? So why don't we have that same perspective with today? That if we change something very small today, it can have a huge impact on the future.
Absolutely.
You know, so
Yeah.
like even if that's 10 push-ups, just freaking do it, because it might cause this chain reaction, and you know that is the biggest thing, is finding the balance to do these things, but you have to be so intentional to carve the time, because if you don't, then it's not going to happen. But I think by like writing it down, whatever that is, and you know, just making the time, and really, like you said, you have to fight so hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, I talk about this a lot with my patients, that I tell them their life is a gift and their health is an accomplishment. And in terms of changing their life, it can't be something drastic. They're not going to become a vegan marathon runner overnight,
Right.
but small changes do have a huge impact over time. And since we live in New Jersey, I say, if you got on a plane and went to leaving Newark and you change your flight plan by just a few degrees, at the end of the flight, instead of Alaska, you're in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And same sort of thing.
Yeah. And I've been seeing a lot of transformation videos, like, people who have lost weight or gotten jacked. And I love seeing like the beginning where they're doing a push-up or they're running and they're, overweight maybe, or super skinny. And it doesn't, like, the action and where they are at, they don't like align, right? So they're doing this thing that doesn't match up with their body. But by the end, it makes sense. So it's almost like you have to you have to do that, like, action or speak that word or whatever, and it's not gonna they're not gonna align, right? So it's like you do the thing even though the reality isn't real. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then you close the gap between what you hope for and who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so power posing. Talk to us.
So power posing, this is from a TED Talk I watched in 2011. And she described how blind children celebrate by raising their hands up into the air, like this, after they win a race. And so researchers were saying, how would they know how to triumph like that? How would they ever know to say, I'm happy, and raise their hands? Because it makes no sense. This doesn't mean I'm happy, does it? But so they did some experiments and asking the question, does a specific chemical lead to a pose? And then in turn, if you do the pose, can you induce the chemical? And it turns out you can. And so I'm sure everyone's heard about, if you pretend to smile just by holding a pencil in your teeth for 2 minutes, your mood increases. And what they found in the study was that if you did a power pose for 2 minutes, you get 15 minutes of increased dopamine, testosterone, and then decreased cortisol, which would be a stress hormone. So these power poses are just either holding your hands up in the air, like a victory pose, or you put your hands on your hips and turn your head to the side and roll your shoulders back and pretend to be Superman or Superwoman, or you just hold that pencil in your teeth. So it's kind of like a life hack.
Yeah.
Like because in the same way that it's hard to be happy, takes work. Life is always a journey, and so these little power poses are just a little boost of dopamine to get you through your day.
I have a theory. I don't know if it's if it's true at all, but I used to go to the chiropractor and I felt like I would go feel better and then I would just get worse. And they said, well, are you doing any exercises to like strengthen your back? And I feel like for me, my posture is horrible. And so I really started to actually think about, sitting up straight. And you can breathe easier. But it's one of those things you have to think about, so now I give thought to it throughout the day, while I'm taking a photo or just doing something that I'll actually try to sit up straight. Do you think that thing, like, it just allows you to breathe better?
Well, yeah, it's got to. Physiologically, that's how we weren't meant to breathe hunched over.
Yeah.
And that's called kyphosis, and a lot of elderly people have trouble breathing because their spine, collapses as you age.
And text neck, right, is so huge.
Yeah, they found that some people are actually growing an extra bone in the back of their neck because they're texting so much.
Yeah. That's definitely been something that's been huge for me. I really haven't done the Superman consistently, but I have been, you know, thinking about it a lot, and I feel like it's been a huge help.
That's great. Um, I we used it in the hospital one time. We had a really bad death. It was a overnight shift, and watching somebody die is really a terrible thing. And we did everything we could, but the staff was just beat emotionally. So we went into the lunchroom and we all did our power like Superman poses. And after a couple minutes, we're looking at each other thinking this is ridiculous, but we still had a lot of patience to see.
Yeah.
And that's what life is, outside of the hospital, is that it doesn't stop, and that's the sign that you're alive, really.
So, I mean, I guess if anything, that's a good point though, too, is in the midst of the chaos, take a break, even if it's 2 minutes.
Right.
To, get it together, refocus, and get back in the trenches.
Yeah.
All right. So what's the next one on the list?
Next one is positivity training.
Nice.
So positivity training, this is an evidence-based intervention. It comes out of Duke, where they have a huge center for wellness. And basically it acknowledges that as humans, we're kind of negative people, or beings, I guess. Because the theory is that through evolution, you didn't survive by walking around saying, "Oh, what a beautiful day." You survive because you're like, "Oh my God, a tiger's gonna eat me." I'm afraid of the cold. I have no food.
Yeah.
And especially as physicians, we look for negativity all the time. Because when someone comes in with chest pain, you don't say, he's got gas. You have to think, he's got a blood clot. He's got a heart attack. This is pancreatitis. And just reading EKGs, I'll read dozens of EKGs, depending on where I work. At the hospital, you read 50 EKGs in a shift, and you have to look at these things so quick. And what you look for are the terrible things. Right. So positivity training it's a conscious act where you write down 3 positive things that happened every day at the end of the night, and you do this for 2 weeks. And what the studies have shown is that after just 2 weeks of training your brain to see 3 positive things each day, you'll have an improved mood for up to 2 years.
Wow.
Which is amazing. But basically you're training your brain to see the good in every day instead of concentrating or dwelling on the negative.
Yep. It's a muscle that's crazy. And so that was one of my takeaways from your talk. I definitely did that. I think I was trying to be a little bit like, I don't know, trying to find bigger things to be thankful for, but it doesn't have to be, you know what I mean? So I do one in the morning and one at night. And like one of my new things to be grateful for is to have a toilet. So
that's a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, a warm house to sleep in, a bed. Like I have a list in the morning that I go through, but at night I was, looking back on the day and finding the positive. And there were some days where I couldn't find 3 things, but I had to work at it. And that's the training the muscle is it actually felt like work. But it's also kind of sad, but now I can look back and like my muscles a lot stronger, and I can find a lot of dumb things or significant things to be thankful for.
Right.
So yeah, I need to get back to the one at night because I stopped doing that, and I think the writing down is a huge piece of the puzzle.
It is.
So now my routine is in the morning, just like speaking them out loud and being thankful. But I also heard a speaker talk about grateful steps. So I think you and I have talked about this before, but
Right.
waking up in the morning and when your first foot hits the floor, say thank, and when my second foot hits the floor, say you. And as I'm walking to brush my teeth or whatever, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I did those with the writing the list too, and I felt like that was just an incredible way to start the day with gratefulness of waking up, having breath, all that stuff.
Yeah. And when you started doing it, I started thinking about you doing it every time that I stepped on the floor. And yeah, it's just a different way to start your day instead of saying this full floor is freezing. The heat does not work in this room. To say thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Big change.
Yeah, so that's a huge one that anyone can start today. And I mean, I love things that are proven, and for that to have statistics of it being so effective.
Yeah,
everyone's got to do it.
Yeah, and you can redo it. I first started looking into the science of happiness in about 2011, and in 2012, and I did a talk on it. So I did all this research, and 2012, if you remove the Kardashians from Google's search engine, the number 2 most searched item is what is happiness?
Wow.
Or / what's the meaning of life?
Right.
It's so, I mean, we're not alone. We're Googling it after the Kardashians.
That's right.
The Kardashians.
All right. So what's the next one?
Well, then I turned towards what I learned from the Christiana Health Wellness Team. That's a hospital in Maryland that is focusing on physician wellness in order to keep their staff engaged, to have better outcomes. And because it's been proven that when your physician is happy, they do better work.
Sure.
And so what some of the ideas that they introduced were identifying your passion and then spending at least 20% of your day doing what you love. So for me, this was, I had to figure out what I liked most about speaking with patients or dealing with patients, and then try to get that into every single day in order to make that day worth it.
Right.
And so in terms of your own occupations and lives, this will take a little homework too. It's just thinking about your life and why you're passionate about what you do. Mm-hmm. And then bringing that into each day in order to help you keep going.
Yeah. I mean, you can you look at that as, I guess with your occupation, but maybe just in life in general, if you're passionate about music or, those are, I think it comes back to balance. Like if you're not, building those things into your everyday or making them somewhat part of your schedule, that just losing the zest for life or whatever.
Yeah. And when you talk about the brain being a muscle, I had in the 4th year of medical school back in 2005 or 2004, we did a simulated patient encounter, and I had a neuropsychologist evaluating me from behind a mirror. And after the 40-minute encounter, we went back and we talked to each other to get some feedback. And she said, you really shouldn't be in medical school. And I was like, oh no, sorry. I'm in the 4th year, it's almost over. I wish you told me this a long time ago. Well, she said, you're going to do fine, but you're not going to be happy unless um, you do something every day that involves humor or music or language.
Mm.
And she said, there's 4 regions of the brain, roughly 4 large quadrants that you could divide the brain into. And people get rewards doing activities from the section of the brain that is most, everyone has a different quadrant.
Yeah.
So accountants, when they balance a checkbook, their brain says, "Oh, this is great.
Right.
I just did addition subtraction for 40 minutes." So it's all along the same lines, and that's why I chose emergency medicine, because I had a chance to speak different languages. You interact with people nonstop, and there's a chance for humor, and yeah.
Nice. All right. So when do we get into EMDR?
Oh, EMDR. Well, we can do that right now.
All right.
So, stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Okay.
So the theory is EMDR. That I had this done myself when I spent a year as a volunteer in South America, working in an orphanage, and I got mugged during that year. I was choked unconscious, and the last thing I saw before I woke up were the police coming around the corner. Woke up from that incident in prison. They brought all of us to prison together. So as you can imagine, that was a pretty stressful moment.
Yeah.
And as I was going through medical school, I started to realize I had the signs of PTSD.
Right.
And I spoke with someone on staff, and they said, "Well, let's do this EMDR." And they explained it that it's almost like a hypnotic state where you move the eyes back and forth, and the muscles bulge and stimulate your hypothalamus, which is the memory center. And you use this guided regression back to the moment of the injury, and you take out the negative thought at that point and replace it with a better one. Mm-hmm. So, I'm doing this with the therapist, looking back and forth and in a little trance. And during it, I felt my face hurt, and I remembered that during the attack, I got kicked in my face. My contact lens fell out, and I thought I lost an eye. Wow. And because all of a sudden I couldn't see, and I had completely repressed that memory. And the fact that my face actually hurt during the session blew my mind.
Yeah.
And so we got to that point of the attack, and in my mind I was thinking, well, I got attacked because I was dumb. I was walking in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't have done that. And the therapist replaced it with the thought, bad things happen to good people. Yeah. And within 24 hours, I noticed significant differences. So I talk about EMDR in this lecture because it also stands for emergency medicine doctor. Mm. In emergency medicine, studies have shown that 21% of residents have PTSD compared to 7% in the general population. Wow. And the ER is a constant stream of triggers. Yeah. Violence, just absolute tragedy. The things that come through the doors you can imagine would trigger stress. Yeah. And right now with COVID, it's even worse. Yeah. So yeah, EMDR originally developed for Vietnam vets, but it's a non-pharmacologic effective intervention for dealing with PTSD. So
I want to jump in there and say that, talking about the impact of glass, when I edited this talk, I was seeing a counselor at the time. And I think the week after I did your edit, I saw her, and I've been in therapy for maybe 20 years, and it's beneficial just talking about things and trying to work through things. But for me, I've always felt like there's something wrong, and I felt like we were always searching for it, like trying to dig up something or whatever. And she brought up EMDR that week after, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is,
Wow.
just a God thing, and so while it does treat PTSD, it also can be used for, what they call core negative core emotions. Is that what?
Automatic negative thoughts.
Now, all right. So uh, essentially, I talked with her about it, and we came up with a phrase that, based on different random memories in my life. The core negative statement was, I am incapable. So that was the one that we came up with for me. And mine was a little different than yours. And I think there are different ways to do it, but she had me hold two sticks, and they pulsed one side to the other. And that's what activated the brain thing for me. And we started with the first memory I could think that was associated with, I am incapable.
Wow.
And so we would talk about that thing, and then we would stop, and the things would buzz, and then she'd say, all right, well, what are you thinking about now? And it was so weird. I'm gonna say it's like doo-doo, like, because if I watched it back, none of it made sense. And for me, it wasn't like 24 hours after, but I can't even tell a timeline, but it was a breakthrough in therapy that I cannot describe, because the replacement of I am incapable became I am capable. And in this past year, I've done things that are crazy. Like I ended up writing a book and, pursuing passions. And I feel like it unlocked these things that I have never experienced before in my life. And so I want to encourage anyone who's maybe felt like they've been held back by, to explore this with a counselor, because for PTSD, for sure, I mean, look what happened to you. That's crazy. But it can be used for other things too. And I am such an advocate of it. I want to spread the word as much as I can about that therapy, because it's so weird.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen such a change in you too. It's great to hear you laugh, and you are inspired continually now, and just an amazing transformation. And so, yeah, I can just testify to what you're saying as well.
Yeah. And, like you said before, I think I know all these things, but I can't quote any of the sources. But I heard a dude say, our part of our brain, it's like programmed basically that 75% of it is going to be negative, like wanting to go negative with our thoughts and our feelings. So you have to fight. You have to first identify like that you're in that pattern, but then want to get through it and find these things that you can combat and train those muscles. And for me, I threw everything at it, like all sorts of different things. Like I can't just say it was just EMDR, but I know that was a huge role. I know the thankful writings at night were a huge role in switching that part of the brain.
Right.
So I forget, is there more in the...
Well, there was, I talked about priorities, being honest with yourself about what you want out of life, and then pursuing that.
Yeah.
So that's an easy one. I talked about peers, because in terms of burnout among physicians, the number one predictor of happiness is the attitude of your peers. So, I'm sure you could think of something from The Office that, if you're surrounded by happy people, it's a lot easier to be positive. And yeah, it's hard to find a group of like really happy people. So you can always, I talk about creating a network of nice, just breaking down isolation, and creating real bonds with people, both at the workplace and in your life that are going to support you.
Yeah, in the past episode with Jason Schuler, he was talking about you become the average of the 5 people that you hang out with. So, a lot of people talk about that in terms of success or income, but for sure attitude. And that's the biggest thing is mindset.
Right.
So, you're a doctor, you are around people, but COVID, can we talk like how do we do that? Because I don't have a ton of friends. I maybe have one friend, or that I see in real life.
Yeah.
I think Zoom's been important, or it's weird. Like on TikTok, there'll be people or YouTube who are holding lives where they're in front of their computer doing stuff, and sometimes I join in or on a podcast because I feel like I'm in the room with someone,
Yeah.
as impersonal as that is, like it's just so important, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I recently heard a discussion of trees, where this woman, scientist was, she did an experiment on the vitality of a tree, like a forest that was planned versus a forest that is classified as old growth, where you just let all the plants grow wherever they want. And the planned forest actually ended up being more unhealthy than the old growth forest. And what she was able to do was trace the DNA of fungus that the trees spread to the other plants.
Mm-hmm.
And she was able to establish that the entire ecosystem was connected.
Yeah.
And if you think about our communities like that, we need each other.
Yeah.
We roots and fungi.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, Zoom is great. I've read articles suggesting that you just do old phone conversations, without, well, if you can do it with images, that's great. But writing letters, they say is great too. Just going old school and sending a letter to someone. I think we're getting closer to the end. But whatever you can do to reach out to others is ultimately going to help yourself.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure you and I talked about this, but the importance of mental health. I mean, just talking to a therapist, like just talking it out, isn't there some huge benefit from that?
Well, when you share something, you cut it in half.
Okay. Yeah. That's what we're talking. Yeah.
That's easy. If you don't have a therapist, or if you're just the simple act of writing it down, can help. And I mean, actually, the last part of the talk we didn't mention yet, but you mentioned a little bit earlier was gratitude.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this was stress to me. One of the first times that I had to change jobs, I was just devastated. I was taking a big pay cut, and I thought my life was ending. And my boss at the time said, "Well, Tim, you got to be grateful." And I was like, "What?" But without gratitude, it's hard to really enjoy life.
Yeah.
And I brought up a couple of quotes on this. One of them was, "Nothing new can come into your life unless you're grateful for what you already have." And then there's a quote from Oprah be thankful for what you have. You'll end up having more. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you will never ever have enough.
Mm.
And so every night, that's what I do before I go to sleep. Is I think and verbalize what I'm grateful for, because it's just so important for enjoying the moment. Is embracing that gratitude.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a very not intuitive thing to do, but the Bible talks a lot about just constantly being grateful, even in bad circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So through the lens of faith for me, I will thank God for a bad situation. I don't know, like just it's a beautiful thing to do. And then I heard Tony Robbins say, life, like instead of looking at a bad thing happening to you, think about that happening for you. So, switching your perspective on that bad experience at work, like, man, this is horrible, turns into, thank you so much for this happening, because now whatever next is going to happen. And, so many times when you look back in your life, you can look at that journey and all of those things have led to where you are today. Right. So even if that place is bad, well, you just got to be grateful for it.
Yeah, it's an opportunity.
Yeah. And it's all about perspective. It can either be a bad thing or it can be an opportunity. So like, it's just crazy to think that you have the power to just, like if a bad thing happens to two different people, how can they have different attitudes? And it's at the end of the day, choice. And I feel like a lot of times you feel like you don't have a choice, but we do.
Yeah, I talk about perspective a lot with patients too. And I say, if you hurt your back and you just lost your job, it hurts a lot. But if you hurt your back and you just won Powerball, it's going to be okay. But it's, several people have said that quote over the years, that life is 10% action and 90% reaction. Yeah. And so it's true. Even though it's a hard, difficult thing to look at your current situation and say, I'm gonna make lemonade today. It's ultimately it's gonna lead to success.
Yeah, and I think one of your steps was doing an act of kindness.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the biggest things is getting the focus off of yourself and your current situation. Like, I don't know what the science is behind it, but I feel giving is by far so much better than receiving. Like it's so exciting to, put in some effort and some thought towards someone else. I don't know. It's a huge help for me in times of difficulty.
Well, jumping back to that Google search I did in 2012, the answer for what is the meaning of life was number one, being busy. Mm-hmm. And then number two, having the focus on someone else.
Right.
And so I tell, healthcare providers, you're so lucky because you are really busy, and secondly, your job, you get paid to help other people. Yeah. And, healthcare, it's easy to see that, but it's true of so many professions, right. Banking, mortgaging, retail, you're ultimately helping other people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was the creation of Lens Life, is I felt like I was just going through the motions of life. But when I stopped to think about what's the impact of what I do, like there is an impact. So when I gave it meaning, the thing that I did, it made work more meaningful and, felt like I had a purpose and I'm not just going for a paycheck. So right. I think with anything that anyone does, you can get wrapped up in the monotony of it, the just going through the motions. So it's important to recenter and think about what it is.
Yeah.
So we talked about a lot. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to throw in there?
No, I mean, I'm glad that you had me on today. And I'm so happy for the changes that you've made in your own life that you're telling others about, you know, because that's a gift to someone.
Yeah.
I had my talk with saying, well, there's a physician shortage. You know, in 2010, they predicted by 2025, we'd be 90,000 physicians short of what America needs. In the pandemic, we lost 10 to 12% of practices closed. So that, you know, that shortage is even greater. It's a national health crisis. And so I've said it, say at the end of the talk, I hope this talk helps you help someone else, and, you know, because we need you. And I think that's what you're saying to people too.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Sure.
Stay strong, everyone out there during the pandemic. Put one of these things that we talked about into practice, because it like anything can be overwhelming. But if one thing spoke to you, just do that one thing and see what happens. And if that does nothing, try another thing. But don't stop trying, because honestly, I was about to stop trying. I felt like 20 years of trying was getting me nowhere, but I did find some things that led to a breakthrough. So keep going, and thanks for what you do, Tim, on the front lines there, and keep up the good work.
You too, brother.
All right, man. We'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks so much for joining us.